It was a warm Friday afternoon, the kind of day where the air feels heavy with possibility, yet ominously charged. On Pine Avenue, just outside Riverside's vibrant downtown, Officer Alex Abel sat in his patrol car. The last dregs of coffee swirled in his cup, the only thing punctuating his idle thoughts. Alex liked to think of himself as someone who upheld the law, but in truth, the badge on his chest often felt like a crown, an emblem of unchecked authority. Today, that authority would be tested in ways he could never anticipate. Across the street, a black man emerged from a busy cafe. His dark, tailored suit clung to him with precision, a stark contrast to the bustling casualness of the street. His name was Drake Coleman. Returning to Riverside after years away, Drake exuded an air of quiet confidence, his every step deliberate. What the onlookers didn't know was that Drake had recently been promoted to captain and was now assigned to the very division headquarters where Alex Abel worked. But that revelation would come later. As Drake crossed the intersection, Alex's eyes locked onto him. Something about the man, perhaps his unflinching composure, made Alex's grip tighten on the steering wheel. There was nothing suspicious about Drake, but for Alex, prejudice clouded judgment, and assumptions dictated his next move. Slamming his car door shut, Alex strode toward Drake, his posture radiating hostility. Chatter of the street quieted. The energy shifted. A few pedestrians slowed their steps, sensing an unfolding confrontation. "Hey, you!" Alex barked, his voice slicing through the urban din. "What are you doing around here?" Drake stopped, his steady eyes meeting Alex's. His face was a picture of calm, but there was a flicker of disbelief. "I'm heading to a meeting," he replied, his voice measured, respectful. Alex stepped closer, his tone dripping with disdain. "You look like you're up to no good. Got any ID?" Drake's hand moved to his jacket pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. Years of navigating spaces where he wasn't welcome had taught him caution. "Of course, officer. Let me show you." Before Drake could retrieve his wallet, Alex's face twisted in anger. "You think you can talk to me like you're somebody important?" Without warning, Alex grabbed Drake's arm, yanking him forward with unnecessary force. In an instant, Alex swung his fist, striking Drake hard across the face. The blow staggered Drake. A murmur rippled through the small crowd gathering nearby. One woman gasped audibly, clutching her phone. Others stood frozen, unsure whether to step in or step back. Drake raised a hand to his face, where pain and indignity burned hot. His suit, the fabric he had donned as a symbol of professionalism, was now a silent witness to an injustice far too familiar. Straightening himself, Drake's composure returned, though his voice carried a new edge of authority. "You just made a big mistake, officer," Drake said firmly, his voice low but commanding. Alex froze mid-step, the arrogance in his stance faltering. "Oh, yeah? And what mistake is that, buddy?" Drake didn't flinch. "I'm Captain Drake Coleman," he stated, his tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. "The new captain of your division headquarters." The color drained from Alex's face. "What?" he stammered, his bravado evaporating like smoke. "You're lying." Reaching into his jacket pocket, Drake retrieved his ID card, holding it up for Alex to see. The official badge glinted in the afternoon sun. "Does this look like a lie to you?" The bystanders, some recording on their phones, gasped audibly. The weight of the moment sank in, as Alex's gaze darted between the ID and Drake's unyielding expression. The power Alex had so brazenly wielded moments ago now slipped through his fingers like sand. Drake's voice remained steady, but his words carried the gravity of consequence. You assaulted a superior officer. And believe me, Officer Abel, you will answer for this." Alex opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His badge, once a shield, now felt like a noose tightening around him. Drake pulled out his phone and dialed. "This is Captain Coleman," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "I need a squad at Pine and Main Street immediately. There's been an incident involving Officer Alex Abel. Charges will be filed." The sound of sirens broke the silence as backup arrived. Sergeant Evander Tsemba stepped out, his experienced eyes assessing the scene. "Captain Coleman," Evander greeted, a mixture of respect and unease in his tone. "What's going on here?" Drake's explanation was succinct, but every word carried weight. Evander turned to Alex, his expression hardening. "Is this true?" Alex stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know he was the captain." Evander's gaze didn't soften. "It doesn't matter who he is. You assaulted a citizen, and now you'll face the consequences." Turning to his team, he gave the order. "Cuff him." The click of handcuffs echoed loudly, a sound that reverberated with finality. Alex didn't resist. The weight of his actions bore down on him as his colleagues escorted him to the squad car. Drake stood silent, his face unreadable. Turning to Evander, he said, "Handle this by the book. I'll be filing formal charges back at the station." As Alex was driven away, the realization of his fall from grace settled heavily on him. Just moments ago, he had felt untouchable. Now, his career and reputation lay in ruins, a cautionary tale in the making. To those watching this unfold, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The hours following Alex Abel's arrest reverberated through the precinct like a thunderclap. News of the incident spread quickly, fueled by social media clips from bystanders who had captured the altercation. The videos showed every harrowing detail: Alex's unprovoked aggression, Drake's composed response, and the moment Alex realized the gravity of his actions. By evening, the footage had gone viral, sparking outrage across Riverside and beyond. Drake Coleman returned to division headquarters that evening, his face stoic but his heart heavy. He had spent years breaking barriers, rising through the ranks despite systemic obstacles, and now he was thrust into the spotlight for reasons he would have rather avoided. As he walked into the station, officers who had once been colleagues avoided his gaze, their discomfort palpable. Inside his office, Drake sat at his desk, staring at the stack of paperwork that awaited him. Each page felt heavier than the last, burdened by the weight of a larger truth. This wasn't just about one officer's misconduct, it was a symptom of a deeper issue. The prejudice Alex Abel had exhibited was not an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a system that had allowed such behavior to fester unchecked. A knock on the door pulled Drake from his thoughts. Sergeant Evander Tsemba entered, his expression a mix of respect and concern. "Captain," he began, closing the door behind him, "I thought you'd want to know. The division is divided. Some of the officers feel Alex was just unlucky. Others are saying it's about time something like this happened." Drake's jaw tightened. "Unlucky?" he repeated, his voice sharp. "Unlucky is losing your job because of circumstances beyond your control. Unlucky is facing prejudice every day because of the color of your skin. What Alex did wasn't unlucky, Sergeant. It was deliberate, and it's long overdue that we address it." Evander nodded. "I agree, sir. But the department is under scrutiny now. The mayor's office has called twice already, and the community—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The community is watching." Drake leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "Good," he said finally. Let them watch. Let them see that this department isn't afraid to hold its own accountable. And let them see that change is possible. The next morning, Drake held a press conference outside the station. The steps were packed with reporters, their cameras trained on him. Behind him stood a line of officers, their expressions a mixture of solidarity and unease. Yesterday, Drake began, his voice steady but resolute, a member of this department acted in a manner that was not only unprofessional but deeply unethical. Officer Alex Abel used his authority to target an innocent man based on nothing more than the color of his skin. That man happened to be me. A murmur rippled through the crowd, the weight of his words settling over them. This is not just about one incident, Drake continued. This is about a culture that has allowed prejudice to persist unchecked. As the new captain of this division, I will not tolerate such behavior. Accountability starts here. And it starts now. The crowd erupted into questions, but Drake held up a hand. To the community watching this, I know trust has been broken. It's my responsibility to earn it back. And I promise you, this department will become a place where every citizen feels safe and respected, regardless of who they are. Inside the station, the officers who had witnessed the press conference watched in silence. Some felt a pang of guilt, others a spark of hope. For Drake, the path ahead was daunting, but he was determined to walk it. The ripples of that day's events would extend far beyond Riverside, igniting conversations about race, power, and accountability. But for now, Drake Coleman focused on the work ahead, knowing that real change always starts with one brave step forward. Months had passed since the day Alex Abel's arrest shook Riverside, but the echoes of that moment still reverberated through the community and the police department. Drake Coleman stood in his office, gazing out the window at the city he had once called home and had now pledged to transform. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the streets where both hope and skepticism lingered. The road to rebuilding trust had been far from easy. Drake's decision to address the systemic issues within the department had met resistance from some officers, but it had also sparked a groundswell of support from others who had grown weary of the toxic culture that had gone unchecked for years. The department was now undergoing mandatory training programs on implicit bias and de-escalation tactics. Drake had also implemented a transparent complaint system, allowing community members to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. One evening, as Drake prepared to leave the station, Sergeant Evander Tsemba approached him. "Captain," Evander began, "there's someone here to see you." Drake turned, his brows knitting in curiosity. In the doorway stood a young black boy, no older than 10, holding the hand of his mother. His wide eyes reflected a mix of awe and nervousness. The mother spoke first, her voice trembling with emotion. "Captain Coleman, my son wanted to meet you. He's heard about everything you've done, and he says he wants to be a police officer someday. Like you." The words hit Drake with unexpected force. He crouched down to the boy's level, a warm smile breaking through his typically composed demeanor. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ethan," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well, Ethan," Drake said, his tone gentle but firm, "if you want to be an officer, promise me one thing. Always stand up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets." The boy nodded eagerly, his eyes shining with newfound determination. Drake stood, shaking hands with the mother, who thanked him repeatedly before leaving. As the door closed behind them, Drake felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work he was doing wasn't just about repairing a broken system. It was about inspiring the next generation to build something better. The following day, the precinct held a community forum, a first in its history. Citizens filled the room, their faces a tapestry of hope, anger, and curiosity. Drake stood at the front, flanked by officers who had committed to his vision of reform. "For too long, this department has failed you," Drake began, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "But I promise you, that ends now. Change doesn't happen overnight, but together, we can create a Riverside where justice truly is for everyone." As he spoke, a hand went up in the crowd. It was an elderly woman who had lived in Riverside her entire life. "Captain Coleman," she said, her voice strong despite her age. "I've seen men in your position make promises before. What makes you different?" Drake met her gaze, unflinching. "Because I've lived it," he said. "I've been judged for the color of my skin, doubted because of where I came from. I know what it's like to feel invisible in a system that's supposed to protect you. That's why I won't stop until this department is one we can all be proud of." The room erupted into applause, not the polite kind, but the genuine, heartfelt kind that signals the beginning of trust. For the first time in years, the community felt heard. In the weeks that followed, Riverside saw tangible change. Crime rates began to drop, not because of harsher enforcement, but because of the stronger bond between the police and the community. Officers who once viewed reform with skepticism now took pride in their roles as protectors and allies. And as for Alex Abel, his case became a cautionary tale taught in police academies nationwide. He was convicted of misconduct and assault, his badge forever stripped away. In a rare moment of reflection, Alex publicly apologized, though his words could never undo the harm he had caused. Drake Coleman's journey was far from over, but as he stood on the steps of the division headquarters one evening, watching the sun set over Riverside, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Against all odds, he had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for change. And to everyone who doubted him, who said one man couldn't make a difference, he had proven them wrong not through words, but through action. What do you think of Drake Coleman's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember, real change starts with one brave step.